Hello, and welcome to Socially Holistic Podcast. Socially Holistic helps coaches and holistic entrepreneurs and women in heart-centered businesses make sense of social media so they can build their own online network and get more clients. As a heart-centered business owner, you do amazing work. Holly's mission in life is to help you help more people. Help us help more women in business with a 5-star review of this podcast. Please leave one today over at iTunes. The more women who find out about this podcast, the more heart-centered businesses will be successful. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the Socially Holistic Podcast, episode 56. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm here with today's very special guest, Lesley Pyne. Lesley supports childless women to heal and to create a life they love. Welcome, Lesley.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about your background?
Well, most of my early part of my career was spent in the civil service working in procurement and latterly for a charity. In tandem with that, when I was around about 35, we started trying to have children. We went through a number of goes of IVF and all of which were unsuccessful. We stopped when I got to 40 and I joined a support charity called More to Life and found some great friends and great help and support through that. But I still really struggled with grief and sadness and working out who I am. And then about, 4 years ago, I gave up my job. I studied NLP, which really helped me to heal and to put everything in perspective. And I realised then that I could use both my skills in NLP and my own experience to help other women. I started a business coaching midlife women, but I really wanted to work with childless women, but it took me quite a while to be ready and if you like, confident enough to be able to do that. So last July, I set up my business supporting childless women. So that's, in a nutshell, very quickly, how I've got to be where I am now.
That's excellent. I love how you've pulled through the combination of your own life experiences and the tools and techniques that helped you transform your life. Yes,
it is a combination, and also because of what I do, I have to be out there telling my story. And that's been, for me, the biggest challenge because it's kind of hard. It can be kind of hard, but I realise that I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for all those other women that I'm helping.
And that also gives you credibility.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because one thing is going out there and saying, yes, I can help you with your grief and everything, but I've never been through it. And another thing is, I've been through this. These are the tools and these are the techniques that helped me, and I want to help you now.
Absolutely, yes.
So much more powerful.
It is, yes. It is very powerful, yes.
So tell us a little bit about the women that you work with.
Mostly, women who've struggled to have children. So often they've been through treatment. Often maybe a partner didn't want children, but they wanted children and couldn't have them. Struggling with grief and sadness, and to come to terms with both their life and to work out who they are now. There's such a focus on motherhood in the world, in our lives, and if you're not in that club, it can be really tricky. It's difficult to find your place.
Yes, I totally agree. I remember when my friends first started having children, it was like I didn't want to be in that club. Sure. But still, it completely changed the relationships because, now they were, obviously distracted with the most important things in their lives, which were, their children, and rightly so. But it completely changes the world around you if you don't have children, even if you've chosen not to, which of course is not the case with your clients. But I can totally understand how things shift.
And a lot of people struggle because you lose all your friends.
Yeah.
Because they are talking about their children, and it is so hard to be in a room with other people who don't understand. And often what they will say is, "Well, have you tried to adopt? Have you tried this? Have you tried that?" And yes, you have, or you don't want to, and you just feel like a fish out of water, really.
Yeah, I completely understand that. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to discuss with you today is you mentioned that you wanted to share some facts about fertility because this is something that you're very passionate about.
Well, yes, I think there's a lot of focus in education about not getting pregnant and not having, well, just not getting pregnant when you don't want to. But what we don't realise as women is our fertility starts dropping in our late 20s. And after 35, as I think Kirsty Allsop described it a couple of months ago, it drops off a cliff. So I think, I mean, obviously, I'm not telling women to go out and get pregnant with the first man you find. And it's important to know these facts because then you can make informed decisions. I mean, for me, I was 35 or 36 when we started trying. If I'd known that my fertility was already dropping so much, we'd have started trying earlier. Mm-hmm. My life might be different. And I know a lot of other women in the same boat. And the other thing is that the IVF is not a panacea. Overall success rate for IVF is 25%. Wow. And yeah, it's quite low, isn't it? And if you're over 40, that drops to 12.5%. So it's important to know the facts and to make informed decisions early enough. Because if you wait till you're 35 and you've got a problem, you've got a limited time to sort it out as well.
Exactly. At least if you know the statistics, you can plan accordingly. Because I know a lot of women aren't ready to have children until they're in their mid 30s or late 30s. But at least then they know what their options are going to be, and their options might be adoption rather than natural, having no children.
Yeah. Absolutely. As you say, yes, it's important to know the facts. At least if you know the facts, you can make an informed decision. Yeah.
Excellent. So tell me a little bit about how you work with women and how you help them move beyond the grief and into finding a fulfilling life.
Well, I describe the feeling as being, I'm into butterfly metaphors, and I know you've recently interviewed Lisa McLaughlin. She's done some lovely butterflies for me, because I think we feel like we're in a cocoon and we don't know how to get out, and we don't know what sort of butterfly we want to be. So the first thing is to look at work on the grief and sadness. And I'm studied in NLP. I use a process called timeline to get rid of that grief and the sadness and let go of all the dreams of motherhood and that aren't going to come true, because you have to leave those behind and let go of them before you can move on. And then what we do is work out who you are now, what's important to you, and then you can start to build your life moving forward.
And I imagine that for a lot of women, and I know this is across the board with humanity, it can be so difficult to let go of things, especially those big things in our lives that we were very emotionally invested in.
It can, and often it isn't just the childlessness that you're letting go of. It's other dreams of all sorts of dreams, being a grandparent as well, actually. Yes. That's you have to do that in order to move on. It's you've got to move past it. You've got to leave it behind in order to have a fulfilling life going forward. It is hard, but the processes that I use, a timeline, it's not it's fairly quick and straightforward, and it's not painful. It's not like going to counselling for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. It's
or months and months and months on
end. Indeed, or years, in fact. Yes, it is a very, very straightforward and simple process.
Yes, I've done timeline before. It's amazing how.
Love it.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about it? Because I've trained in it and I've done it and I've experienced it. But since this is your area, I'd love for you to tell our listeners a little more about that.
I say I love it too. Actually, it's the theory is that when an event happens to you, if it's pretty emotional, you don't learn from it, and it's like a string of pearls. Every time a similar event happens, you go back to that original event. So I'm taking an example of, I work with a chap who, he had road rage, not massive, great, really bad road rage, but when we delved into it, he'd been in a fight when he was 7, and the older guy, the other guy was fighting with, was bigger, so he was bound to lose. And every time someone cut him up, unconsciously, he was going back to that fight when he was 7 and feeling inadequate, feeling I'm not enough, I'm all sorts of negative things. So by going back to that event when he was 7, learning from it, realising that he was bound to lose and he was okay, it cuts that string of pearls. So he didn't have the road rage anymore.
Wow. That's very, very powerful. And I think that's something that it can be so difficult for us on our own to actually look back into our past and see those things because, it's so traumatic, as you said, and it's often a very, very old memory.
Absolutely. And sometimes, I've done timeline, I don't know about you, but when I didn't even know what I was going back to, but it healed it. And the beauty of it is that when working with a client, I don't need to know what she's going back to. That's the beauty of NLP and timeline, that it's you don't have to tell everything to the person that you're working with.
I think that's very, very important to call out, because I think there's so many things that they're so traumatic that people are either ashamed or just uncomfortable going to a therapist or someone and explaining the whole story, because once you say it out loud, it's like it just makes it so much more intense. And I think that's important to call out, the fact that you need to kind of mention what it is that you want to work on, but you don't have to go into all the gory details of this horrible thing that happened to you. Absolutely.
And as you know yourself, then if it's very quick timeline, 20 minutes, half an hour, and it's all dealt with. It's not, as you say, months and months or years and years on a therapist's couch.
Exactly, which makes it much more affordable for many people.
Absolutely.
So you've also got, in addition to your offerings, you've got a 6-week program.
I do, yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about that? How do you work with people on that?
Well, the program is called Let Go and Move On, 6 Steps to Finding Fulfilment After Childlessness. So we start with identifying what you're letting go of, and then we do the timeline as appropriate. And after we've healed things, we start to look at who you are now, and so that you can build your life going forward. My thing at the end of it is that you believe you're enough, you're authentic, you've got the courage to be you, because a lot of it's like coming out of your skin, and you feel comfortable in your own skin. And if people want to talk to you about your childlessness, you're very happy to do that if you want to, or not. So and it's a very positive focus moving forward, to know who you are in this world of mother focus.
And it's also, I think, very much about accepting yourself as you are, and accepting the fact that you don't fit into this norm that society has created. Everyone must have children. Everyone thinks that they should have children, and you and I don't, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Yes, it is. Plough your own furrow, or the road less travelled or something. But yes, absolutely.
Yes.
To work, yes. And what you're doing and who you are is absolutely fine, not fitting into everybody else's stereotypes, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was somewhere on your website that I read about how once you came to terms with your situation and came to accept it, you realized that your life has a lot of benefits now that you don't have children. I mean, it seems to me that you've gone from seeing yourself as childless to child-free in some ways. Or do you prefer not to use that word?
I don't. I mean, it's bizarre that we use the term childless, the name child, to describe
exactly
what we haven't got. For me, it's always been about capability. We couldn't have children, and kind of you have to use these terms on the internet, don't you? And child-free is often described as not wanting children, and choosing not to have children. Okay. So I don't know. I'm just very happy with my life. I've got I don't like to label it particularly, but we have I have a great life, very positive. Got freedom and flexibility that we wouldn't have if we had children, and we take absolute benefit of that.
And I think that's something that a lot of women who still haven't let go of, the opportunity to have children, aren't seeing the benefits of it, because they're still kind of holding on to that which they cannot have. Absolutely, yes. Once you have let go of it, then you do see the positives and the benefits. I've just started a series of inspirational stories on my website, because what that will be is people who have come through and come out the other side, and they will be telling their stories as to what the benefits are for them, what's positive for them, and what helped them. So that because it's always helpful when you're in the
in the hole to see people who've got out of the hole and how they did it. So.
Exactly, and to see things from another perspective as well, and to see that there's help and there's hope, and you can get through.
Absolutely, yes.
I love that idea. I think that's really, really important.
Thank you.
So, Lesley, how can women know when it's time to get help? If they're struggling with that, whether it's they're going through IVF or they're, getting all the millions of tests and things just aren't working, how can they know when it's time to go see someone to get help with this?
I guess when they realise that they can't help all the time, I would say you always need help. It's always useful to find a community, some sort of support, because you're not alone. The biggest thing we feel is we are alone, and you're not. 1 in 6 couples go to their doctor for infertility, and so there's thousands and thousands of people out there doing it, struggling in exactly the same way that you are. So I would say right at the beginning, find a book, find a website, find somebody else telling their story.
I think that's really, really important to call out. First of all, I think that's very powerful that 1 in 6 couples go to their doctor for infertility. I'd never imagined that the statistics were that high.
Yes. Scary, isn't it?
It is. And I think that's also very important what you called out about how, from the very beginning to get help, whether it's a book or community or a therapist or someone, because I think it is really, really easy when you've got, an issue that's so big to kind of hide and think that you're alone. And I imagine that there might be some shame there as well, because, we think that our bodies should be functioning properly and sometimes they just don't.
Absolutely. There is. That's something I'm just learning about, how to help women, because shame's one of those things we don't talk about. I absolutely love Brené Brown's work. She's a great inspiration to me. And shame is something that we feel, and I'm just working with someone to realise how I can help to overcome that shame.
Yeah, and I think you're right in that it's something that we don't talk about, because it's like, we feel the shame and we're even too ashamed to mention that we have the shame. And
Absolutely.
So it's like it's just this awful downward spiral of, I just feel awful and, I'm just too ashamed to get help. But that help is exactly what we need.
Absolutely. And nobody needs to know, I work with lots of people and nobody would know that I was working with them. So it's obviously absolutely confidential. And I know I have testimonials on my website, but usually it's not the real name because people don't want, and that's absolutely fine. I understand that.
Yes. So, Lesley, what would you say are your top tips on how to move forward and kind of heal from the pain of being childless and start creating a life that you love, that makes you feel really fulfilled?
I would say find support. You're not alone, as we've said. There's lots of people out there. Get help, whether it be me or somebody else. Find help, because it takes an awful long time on your own, and you may never find absolute fulfilment. So work with somebody, find a friend. And the other thing is, if you just be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself. Self-compassion is really important, and we're not always very good at that. So just be kind and do something. Absolutely do something. Don't just sit there wallowing in it. Do something. Take action. That's the best thing. Yeah.
I think that's a really, really good advice, because, as you said, it's sometimes hard to remember that we need to be kind to ourselves when we feel like we're not doing the right things, or our body isn't functioning like it should, or like we think it should. Yeah. Yes. I think that's so important to take action and to get the help that we need, because sometimes having an external, kind of an outside perspective can completely change how we look at the situation that we're in.
Absolutely. And just talking to somebody who's not involved. Your family, your friends will all be giving you advice. I mean, that's one thing I get I would never give people advice. I believe that people have got all the resources inside them. And So it's just sometimes just offloading, just talking to somebody, sharing your story, realizing that you're not alone, and that's so very powerful.
And I think also talking to someone, the appropriate person, because as you said in the very beginning, if you're talking to friends and family, they might say, why don't you just, adopt? And maybe adoption isn't what they want. Maybe they don't want just any child. Maybe they want, their biological child. And so they don't want to hear that same advice over and over again.
Absolutely, yes.
So, Lesley, do you have any other tips or suggestions or things that you'd like to mention about how women can just let go of their dreams of having children if they've determined that's not a possibility and move on?
Well, I've got some little ebooks just recently launched called Small Steps to Healing. So there's some small tips on there. Take action, do something, realise that you can have a positive life and do something to let go of that. There's all sorts of tips out there, but really you have to let go in order to move on.
Yeah, and I think letting go can be so challenging. So that's really, really good that you've got all of those ebooks to help people. So where can people find you online, Lesley, if they want to learn more about you and your work?
My website is lesleypyne.co.uk, and that's lesleypyne.co.uk. My Twitter is Lesley Pyne Coach. So yeah, those are the two main places.
Good. And do you work with people on Skype, or do you just work with people in face-to-face?
No, mainly on Skype.
Oh, excellent.
So anywhere, yes.
Okay, excellent.
Yes.
So you can work with women all over the world.
Absolutely, yes.
Fabulous, because we've got a global audience here, so I think that's really good for them to know that it doesn't have to be face-to-face.
Absolutely, yes, good.
Excellent. Lesley, do you have any women business mentors? Are there any women in business who inspire you?
Yes, I do have a couple. I mean, I mentioned Brené Brown. I mean, I think she's just fabulous for being authentic, open, and starting a movement of something that's unusual, and her work just continues to inspire me. I worked with a business coach. I worked with Karen Knott from Primetime Business, and I think we sometimes go into this, I'll start a business because I can do whatever it is I can do, but business is a lot more complicated than you think it is, as you know. And I would say absolutely find a business coach. She's a great mentor, business coach, guide, friend, and she helped me technically and also personally. And I talked about, how difficult it was to tell my story, and given me a lot of self-confidence and self-belief to be able to do that. So, yeah.
Excellent. Now, you've mentioned a couple of times that it's been very difficult for you to tell your story, and of course, I think, and I know you can tell as well, that it's one of the most powerful parts of how you promote your business, because again, that is what gives you so much credibility. Yes. So do you have any tips for women who may be in a similar situation to you, how to get over that fear of telling your own story when it is so deeply personal, and how to let yourself out there and be vulnerable and really allow other women to connect with you through your story?
I would say find a safe place to start with. Don't just suddenly burst out and start. I would say find a safe environment with people you trust and gradually build up from that.
Okay.
I'd say that you need a certain level of confidence and self-belief. I mean, for me, I realised it doesn't matter. It's not about me. It's about the women that I'm helping. That was a great big shift for me. So it doesn't matter what I feel. What matters is that I'm helping other women. And I mentioned about Brené Brown. I think I've got her. I can just see it here as I show up, be seen, own my story, write the ending. If you do own your story, you can write the ending. That's a very powerful belief for me, and that really helps me to have the inner, if you like, confidence to be able to do that.
I love that because it can be really scary, even if you know that it's the right thing to do, to share your story and to open up, because you know you're going to be helping people. It can just be so scary to get started. And so I think it's important what you said about finding a safe environment to start out. You don't need to just, shout your story to the world as your first step, because that can just be paralyzing.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
And so when you first got started telling your story to people, what were the safe environments that you tried out? Was it smaller groups or, your blog, or how did you get started?
I started with friends. I've got a good support network of friends in the same position. So
Good.
Tested things out with them. And then my blog, and I don't think really anyone was reading it very much to start with. So as you start to build on that, sometimes it's easy on a blog because you don't know that anyone's listening. You don't know that anyone's actually reading it. So just on my blog and with friends, and with also having people who believed in what I was doing was a great help, actually. Great sort of confidence building.
I think that's important, surrounding yourself by the right people.
Absolutely, yes.
And it's funny what you say about the blog and not very many people reading it at the beginning. I just had this conversation last night with a podcast guest.
All right.
And I think this is something that so many people, when they first start out blogging, aren't aware of. Not that many people are reading your blog from the very beginning. Maybe no one's reading your blog from the very beginning. So that is a perfect time for you to get comfortable, writing about your story, telling your story, sharing things, because it's probably going to be a while before people come around and find that blog post. So, you can put it out there and it's safe because millions of people aren't going to be reading it.
Absolutely.
Yes, millions of people could read it, but it's actually not going to be that way from the very beginning. So it is relatively safe.
Absolutely, yes.
And not only that, you're not seeing people's faces. It's not like when you get up in front of a room and you tell your story and you can see everyone sitting there looking at you. I think it's a kind of a low stress, kind of an easier way to share your story by writing.
It is. And actually, you don't have to put... I've got my name, my website is my name, and I've got my picture on there, but you don't actually have to do that, do you? You could have a different name and you don't have to have your picture on there.
Exactly.
So that's, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You could create a business name and build your blog around that, and that might even feel even more safe. So, yeah, very good. Lesley, thank you so much for joining us today and telling us about your story and your business story and how you wove your own personal experience into a business. I think that's just so inspiring, because I think so many women have been through similar things or other personal challenges, and I think it's very inspiring to hear how you can create a business out of that.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Any final words of inspiration for women who might need your help?
Only just find support. Find somewhere to tell your story, and you're not alone.
Good. I think that's so important to call out. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. And remember to visit sociallyholistic.com/SHP56 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Socially Holistic Podcast with your host, Holly Wharton. Please help us help more women in business by giving us a 5-star review of this podcast. The more women who find out about this podcast, the more successful businesses there will be. So please leave a 5-star review today over at iTunes. Thank you.